I'm making a deck in Pokemon TCG for all 825 Pokemon currently in rotation, and trying my best to make each deck a winner. And today's watery deck led me to some wacky, big, unexpected moments, which is when Pokemon TCG is at its best. But was the deck a meta champion, or was it a Veluza loser? With 822 slots on the wheel, here we go. Krabby. Alright, so we're going water, but what Krabby actually does, I'm not sure if I know or if anyone does. So there's only one Krabby card and one Kingler card, both of which come from 151. I'm assuming Krabby will see less action today, unless in a pinch. Do you get it? But as Krabby is the reason for the season, let's see what it does. Its saltwater attack flips a coin, and if heads, searches and attaches 2 water energy from the deck to itself. Then Crabhammer hits for 50 with 3 water energy. Actually not a bad basic Pokemon card. Kingler has Hammer Arm, who does 90 and discards the top deck of your opponent's deck for 3 water energy. Could I play Kingler Mill? Probably not. Instead, I'd be taking a look at Guillotine that does 220 damage for 4 water energy. A steep cost, but not horrible damage. I learned my lesson with Nosepass, Probopass, that Krabby and Kingler didn't have to be my main attackers, even if they were the featured cards today, and thus would probably be best set up as backup attackers in a deck. With its attack for 220 needing 4 energy, I need to create a deck that really prioritized searching and attaching water energy. Lucky for Kingler, and likely intentional in most of the water Pokemon's designs, that's sort of the water archetype in Pokemon TCG, at least at the moment. Decks with high amount of water energy and attacks that stack damage or deal a significant blow if large amount of energy is attached. Now, the popular choice is to build out something like Chien-Pao and Baxcalibur. Lapras EX. Okay, I've been thinking about this card for such a long time, and while Lapras will likely have its own time in the sun when its name inevitably comes up on the wheel, this seemed like the perfect opportunity to utilize Lapras EX. Now, Lapras EX is a Terra Pokemon that has 2 main attacks. Its Power Splash does 40 times damage for every energy attached, water or not. Then its secondary attack, or move rather, is Larimar Rain. Larimar, so I had no clue what it was. Fun fact, Larimar, it's like a mineral found exclusively in the Dominican Republic. It's like this blue rock. Looks pretty cool. Maybe it's what Lapras snacks on to get the blue tint. Anywho, Larimar Rain searches the top 20 cards of your deck for energy and allows you to attach any of the energy you find to any of the Pokemon in play in any manner. My plan was to stuff the deck with water energy to then provide charge up for Lapras if I felt I'd survive long enough to attack. Or also charge up our boy Kingler, and then also one of our other attackers, Wailord from Journey Together. Wailord is a 240 basic Pokemon that does 10 plus 50 damage for each water energy attached using its Hydro Pump attack, needing a minimum of 4 energy of any kind to attack. These Pokemon were all massive energy consumers, so I stuck in my favorite line of Clamperl, Gorebyss, and Huntail. I'm going to continue to include this trio in probably any water type deck I make until someone tells me I shouldn't, because I love what they all bring to the table. With Huntail's ability to save all water energy if an active Pokemon is knocked out that has water energy on it, then Gorebyss having an attack that does 30 for each water energy attached, but on its turn allows for free unlimited energy attached from hand. The only other Pokemon I put in there was Fezandipiti, just to help with card draw, as I didn't include much else in the way of hand draw. My trainer cards list was limited, but key. I knew I'd want to prioritize getting the Lapras out ASAP, along with the other basics, so I included Nest Balls and Artazons. Crispin was very important in my game plan here, so I included 4. Crispin searches the deck for 2 types of any basic energy, and free attaches one of them to a Pokemon of your choice and puts the other in your hand. Crispin would be my boy. Someone at a tournament recently asked me why Crispin's holding a frying pan. I'm assuming he's a chef or something, but if anyone knows any good Crispin lore, please let me know. With high retreat cost Pokemon in play, something like a well-timed boss's order could really foil my plans if Lapras hadn't had a chance to do its thing yet. So I included 2 switches in the deck, but also included some Surfers, a lesser seen supporter that lets you switch your active Pokemon with another Pokemon on your bench and draw your hand up to 5. I also decided to include some luxurious capes, which adds 100 HP to the non-EX Pokemon they're attached to, but also makes them worth an extra prize card if taken on. I also added a one-off of Penny, the supporter who lets you pick up a basic card and their attached cards and put them back into your hand. I wasn't sure how helpful Lapras was going to be after using Larimar Rain as an attacker, so wanted an out to perhaps pick Lapras up if that was going to be necessary. I went through my deck feeling good, and realized I didn't include an A-Spec, but I wasn't really sure if I'd need one. After looking, I decided on Neutralization Zone. Even with the Fezandipiti and Lapras in play, I thought having an extra layer of protection to Wailord and Kingler, especially later in a match, could come in clutch. I filled out the deck with 14 Water Energy, 3 Psychic, and 3 Metal, and was off to the races. It felt like I had a meta champion deck on my hands, but I felt this way before only for the deck to be a Veluza loser, so I'd see where I'd go in my practice matches. In my first matchup, I was going first and got a near perfect opening hand with the Lapras EX, Water Energy, and Crispin, plus the Fezandipiti. Since I was going first, I'd have to take at least 2 turns to set up and attack, so I took the first turn to just place some energy on Lapras and planned to Crispin ASAP on my next turn. My opponent started with a lone Charmander in their active, and I was surprised when on their turn the best they could do was Boss's Order out my Clamperl into active, stick a Fire Energy on their Charmander, and pray. Unfortunately, those prayers were not answered because I came prepared. I had a switch in hand to put Lapras in active, stick another energy onto Lapras, and just use his attack to KO Charmander, taking a win. So is the deck goated? Win on turn 3? Probably, but I ran it back, and this time I was paired up against a very strange matchup. I again had a great starting hand with 2 Laprases ready to go, and the man of the hour, Krabby, chillin' on my bench. I got this show on the road with Surfer in hand, and knowing I had other abilities to switch active Pokemon in my deck, I opted to build up a secondary Lapras on my bench rather than the active. This way the Lapras in active could just tank any damage thrown our way, and my bench continued to fill up with Wailmer now joining the fray. I was able to get the Lapras ready to Larimar Rain before they could attack, and Larimar Rain it did. In this same turn, I'd been able to get the Luxury Cape out, and the Wailmer on my bench evolved into a Wailord. This guy was a 340 HP damage-dealing machine, just waiting to be unleashed. Lapras' death brought on by the Okidogi on my opponent's next turn would not be done in vain. I'd quickly return the favor and strike Okidogi down with Wailord's glorious charged up attack thanks to Larimar Rain. With Krabby on the backline, I didn't want to rest on my laurels, so I utilized Crispin and energy in hand to slowly build up Krabby and the Lapras as well. But Wailord was a formidable opponent and just kept taking down anything put in its way. It became clear that a final boss in my opponent's bench was being charged up though. A Kangaskhan EX, who I don't normally encounter, but at 230 HP, Wailord was the only Pokemon that I had who would be able to deal with it. So I made a sacrificial play here, as Krabby, now Kingler, had been slowly being built up. I switched Kingler into active, and let him use his 220 attack to take out the active Taurus. Kingler surprisingly actually survived the hit from Kangaskhan EX on the next turn, but that didn't matter as I was able to retreat Kingler back and send in Wailord for the final game-winning KO. This water deck had such a great flow to it. Do you get it? I never felt like I was drawing into a card that wasn't helping, and the key was utilizing Larimar Rain to get all of the energy out of my deck as early as possible, leaving behind primarily cards that only pushed me further towards victory. Of the 4 decks I've created for this challenge thus far, this was also the first deck I didn't find myself needing to go back and tinker after each match. I was just leaving it the way it was. I played one more casual match before I'd be hitting the competitive scene for the final showdown to determine if this deck was actually as good as it felt playing. My final matchup was against a really strange deck, and it's a deck that I actually really want to spend a quick moment to highlight because it actually won. And although I don't think it would win against most meta decks, it had so much weird damage shifting and moving pieces that it made for actually a really hard matchup. It ran the classic poison combo of Brute Bonnet, Ancient Energy Capsule, and Perilous Jungle. Fan Rotom was started and actually used to do some decent damage while taking its own damage from poison and feeling dispensable to the opponent. The draw engine they used was a Dodrio Zooming Draw ability, which I've never seen used. The ability allows the Pokemon to place a single damage counter on it in exchange for drawing a single card. Of course, this pairs well with the Pokemon's attack, who does 10 plus 30 damage for each damage counter on the Pokemon. There were some Monkey Dories in the mix, and with that damage flying everywhere, it led to a very close matchup that I lost due to the late game Mimikyu, who came out while I had a Lapras inactive and no way to swap in an attacker. In general, I had played 4 casual matches, and I felt like my deck was exactly where I wanted it to be. It was dripping with potential. Dripping. Another water joke. You get it? I only hoped the deck would stand up on its own in the final competitive match and prove to be a meta champion. This final matchup was really fantastic, so I'm going to do my best to really give the step-by-step here, so you understand just how close and how fun of a match this really was. The match started and I had one of every energy in my hand, along with the Crispin, Ultra Ball, and Nest Ball. Across the way, I spotted the little gremlin that's been haunting me ever since starting this challenge, Impidimp. I was set up to go first, which let me get my Fezandipiti and a Lapras on the bench with my water energy. While I'd be able to get my Lapras fully set up with 3 necessary energy next turn, I'd already decided that the Clamperl inactive was likely not going to make it back to my bench, and was serving more of a pawn role with 60 HP and 2 energy retreat cost. My opponent attached an energy for turn, put down a Snorunt, meaning we'd get some Frostlass in the mix here today, and then Cyranoed, pulling 3 EX cards from their deck and placing them in their hand. A lot of setup for something wicked that I knew was coming my way soon. It was now back to me. I was able to Crispin the necessary energy onto my Lapras, and had to hope that on the next turn my Clamperl inactive would get taken out, giving me access to flip the script, and get a Pokemon on my bench that could actually benefit from the Larimar Rain. I was in no rush to get Lapras out to Larimar Rain because all that energy would go nowhere anytime soon. My opponent was far from asleep though, because Grimmsnarl EX was placed on the bench, and I didn't see this coming, but I should have because it's from my own playbook. The Dunsparce EX was put down on the active. Now the Dunsparce EX does 60 times damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play. And with Lapras and Fezandipiti in play, it certainly took out my Clamperl, as I had hoped, letting me move Lapras into the active. I needed a major big flip the script here from Fezandipiti, and I did something that was a bit odd first. I knew I wanted one more Lapras EX on my bench, and I had one in hand, but I also knew that there was one in deck, and the last thing I'd want to do is flip the script into my 3rd Lapras and still not have either Krabby or Wailmer on my bench for the incoming Larimar Rain. So I Ultra Balled away Lapras EX and a Psychic Energy for a Lapras EX. Then I flipped the script, which was big. It gave me a Nest Ball to get out my Wailmer, a Gorebyss as an emergency attacker, and the Surfer to do a switch and draw up to 5, something that could be very helpful in the coming turns. I attached my energy for turn, and now I hope you brought your umbrellas because it was time for the Larimar Rain, and boy did it rain. I was able to attach 8 energy cards, so I chose carefully. I didn't want to load up on any one specific Pokemon, so I spread it out, putting 3 of the water energy on Wailmer, a Metal, 3 water, and a Psychic on my newly benched Lapras, and it was on. My opponent's turn was far less flashy, just doing a 180 to my active Lapras. Getting able to fit in an attack from my active Lapras though was fantastic, as the deck was built around the initial Lapras likely being a goner. But no, this Lapras was left alive, meaning I'd get to attack and do some damage. Now, a funny thing during these rounds is that my deck ran 3 different stadiums, 2 Artazones and a Neutralization Zone, and yet in all of my matches, not once did I see any of them until this game where I drew into the Artazone. Otherwise, they had been hiding. I attached an energy for turn to the benched Lapras, and then surfed him in, letting me draw 5 cards and bring on the Pokemon. I evolved up Wailmer into Wailord, and with all this energy in play, I really wanted to get my Huntail set up, so I Ultra Balled away a Krabby and an extra Gorebyss, but unfortunately, the Clamperl I was looking for seemed to be prized, leading me to just putting a Krabby right back into my hand, meaning twice in this game I Ultra Balled away a Pokemon, only to use the Ultra Ball to ultimately get that Pokemon back. I looked at all of the energy out on my board and weighed my options. Attack into the Dunsparce would be 20 damage short of knocking him out, then he could easily retreat, and the damage I did may be worthless anyway. I looked at Krabby on my bench and knew what I needed to do. I Larimar Rain one more time to get all of the remaining energy out of my deck. It gave me 4 more energy, a Metal which I attached to the active Lapras, and 3 water which went to Wailord. Now keep in mind that my big move I just said was taking all of the energy out of my deck and attaching it to Pokemon, because that was about to really bite me, because Fezandipiti was bossed up into the active spot with 180 damage put on him by the Dunsparce EX. I ran switches and surfers, so I was hoping to draw into one of those, but instead my A-Spec Neutralization Zone came to my hand. Nothing much I could do to save my Fezandipiti, and away he went. My opponent also managed to set up a Monkey Dory, and with my Lapras on the bench sitting with 40 remaining HP, I needed to make sure that all of my hits remaining left as little damage on my opponent's side as possible because I didn't want to give Monkey Dory any ammo. Ready to hit for a consistent 310 damage with my Wailord, it was Wailord time. With Wailord in the active, I hesitated with my Neutralization Zone for a moment, debating on whether or not my opponent would have a stadium like Artazon or Spikemuth Gym to put down in its place immediately. But I had to risk it. I placed it down and knocked out to Dunsparce EX, getting me my first prize cards. I also want to acknowledge that throughout this back and forth, I did put Krabby and Kingler down on my bench. Bad move overall, as it made for an easy Pokemon to boss up with no energy of mine in play. However, this is a Krabby deck, so I felt like the Krabs needed some representation on the bench. Grimmsnarl EX then came into active, and the nice thing about Wailord's base 240 HP is that he would be able to take a hit from Grimmsnarl. I prepared for the 180 HP hit, and oh yeah, that's right, Neutralization Zone. Both my targeted Gorebyss and my active Wailord were safe, for now. It was now my turn, and I stared in frustration because the Wailord that had the Grimmsnarl in front of him could only hit for 310 damage, but the Grimmsnarl's HP was 320. It was times like these that I wish the Snorunt had eventually evolved into Frostlass. I thought about any other options, but with Neutralization Zone down, I felt like this was my only shot, and I had to put the damage onto Grimmsnarl EX, knowing that the two Monkey Dories on the other side would likely be sending that damage right back my way. But where they'd be sending it, I wasn't quite sure. I also put down a Clamperl that I had gotten in my prizes. I put it down as a form of bait, to be honest, hoping that the Monkey Dory would see the low 60 HP over there, the easy, tempting prize card, and that they would both just move the 60 damage over to the Clamperl, leaving my Lapras perfectly safe. And unfortunately, they did not take the bait, as both Monkey Dories put their energy onto Lapras, bringing the game to a one prize card game for my opponent. I still had 4 prizes I was going to need to take, and they had a whole other Grimmsnarl EX on the bench setup, which was very, very bad for me. The Grimmsnarl's hits still didn't land though due to the Neutralization Zone. I was fortunate to draw into my Huntail, meaning any water energy from my active Pokemon if knocked out would go into my hand. But the ability at this point in the game didn't matter, because if any Pokemon were being knocked out, then it meant that the game was done. The evolution was still important though, because it increased the base HP of my Clamperl, and it hopefully bought it some time potentially from the Monkey Dories that I'm sure were glaring at it on the other side. My opponent had also put down the Amulet of Hope on the active Grimmsnarl in the last turn, and it's not an A-Spec I see often. What that does is when the Pokemon that it's attached to is knocked out, the player can then choose 3 cards from their deck and put them into their hand. And to me this read, when you knock out my Grimmsnarl, I'll be happily ending this game by replacing that Neutralization Zone, probably getting a boss's order, and being able to easily clean this up. So I tossed the Luxury Cape onto my benched Gorebyss just to increase base HP, and my Wailord swung, taking out the Grimmsnarl as I collected my 2 prize cards and sat in anticipation and fear. I felt like it was very unlikely I'd be making it out of this next turn alive. Like I said, a boss's ordered comboed with any stadium would win them the game, and that's not even accounting for whatever 3rd card they could pull out. First the Artazon came down and placed the Neutralization Zone. Then came out the Supporter for turn, and it was Brock Scouting, which they used for a single Frostlass. Wait, that was gonna be game. With no way to gust out my Wailord, and my Wailord hitting for 310, the Frostlass would essentially kill the Grimmsnarl by adding 10 HP onto the Grimmsnarl in between turn checkup, and then me doing the 310 for the total 320 damage. I was shocked. Even without any of this, I did get a water in my prize cards, so I did have an additional water to increase Wailord's attack, so Wailord would be able to kill even without the Frostlass, but my opponent didn't know about this water energy. But my opponent accidentally, unintentionally, sent their Grimmsnarl to the grave. And with that, I was able to take out Grimmsnarl on my next turn and win. I had done it, and more importantly, Krabby had done it. And this deck is a certified meta champion. Although this matchup didn't really get to see much of Krabby, I do feel strongly that Krabby and Kingler do deserve a spot in this deck, and having a backup attacker that does 220 damage when it evolves into a Kingler is great, especially if Huntail's out to save water energy. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time on the 825 Deck Challenge.